don't know how free I am. I am what I am, and I am free.
You see, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of where I'm from. Those ones spreading racism, they're just fucking dumb. Now if you're looking at my life, and you say I've assimilated, you simplify things, just a little more complicated. See, I'm a modern day native, with a modern day life. I have modern day problems, and modern day strife. Now I hear other natives, they talk about the past, and will I do the same? Fuck that. See,
Recording in
Welcome
progress.
everyone to this exciting time in the launch and celebration of this great tool for Indigenous-led conservation across our country. In our way, we'd like to start in an opening prayer. And I'm a language learner, and I was taught this prayer by one of my language mentors, Andy Norwegian. And so I'd like to share it with you all today so we can start our conversation in a good way. So the prayer is Nahe Notsi, Dutsene Koni Masi, Masi Jon Etlahe Nits Anide, Nezu Etlahe Egalaunda, Nezu Etlatse Gute, Nezu Etlatse Ducha, Tasi Ajon Ta Nahik Enendi. So this is a prayer, and as it's translated, it means, our Creator, we thank you for this new day. We thank you for our gathering here. Let us work together in a good way. Let us talk to each other in a good way. Let us respect each other in a good way and protect us in all things. So, Masi.
All right, thanks so much, Dati. And for anyone who's just signed on, welcome to this conversation about Indigenous-led conservation. I'm Denise Balkasoon. I'm the Ontario Bureau Chief at the Narwhal. I'd like to say that the Narwhal is committed to upholding the principles of truth and reconciliation in our journalism. And today I'm in Toronto, which is Dish with One Spoon territory, which is a treaty between the Haudenosaunee, the Mississauga, and the Anishinaabe. And Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. So we are gathered on behalf of the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership, the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, the ESAC-OLAM Foundation, and World Wildlife Fund Canada to celebrate and honor the collective efforts, knowledge, and visions for protecting and conserving our lands and water. We will reflect on the wisdom and visions brought forward by Indigenous leaders from generations past, examine current opportunities and challenges for Indigenous conservation leadership, and explore a future where conservation is truly Indigenous-led. We will also celebrate the IPCA Knowledge Basket, a digital space that holds and shares resources to inform and support Indigenous-led conservation initiatives, including Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, IPCAs, across the country. So I'm going to introduce you to the panelists, and then we're going to turn it to them to talk a bit about their work. So Dati Tetso, who you've all just heard from, is the Deputy Director of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. She is Clicho Dene and played a leading role in the launch and operation of the Decho Ke Hodi Stewardship and Guardians Program and the establishment of the Edezi Decho Protected Area and National Wildlife Area. We also have Eli Enens, who is President and co-founder of the ESAC-OLAM Foundation and member of the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership's Leaders Circle. He is recognized internationally as an expert in biocultural heritage conservation and Indigenous economic development. He is a nation builder and Canadian political scientist, focused in constitutional law, geopolitics, and ecological governance. Hi, Eli. We also have Megan Leslie, the President and CEO of World Wildlife Fund Canada. Prior to joining WWF, Megan was a member of Parliament and represented Halifax for 2 terms. As a passionate environmentalist, she was proud to assume the roles of environment critic for the official opposition and vice chair of the Government Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. And then we also have Frank Brown, who is the hereditary chief of the Heiltsuk Nation, senior advisor to the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, and member of the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnerships Leader Circle. He's also an adjunct professor in resource and environmental management at Simon Fraser University. All right, so Dati, if you could talk a bit about yourself and your work and what you do, and also what Indigenous-led conservation means to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to join on this panel discussion and alongside all of these wonderful panelists whom I respect and admire. I've joined the Indigenous Leadership Initiative as their deputy director, and I'm working alongside Valerie Coutoir in the work of the ILI. And I joined them from my time with the Decho First Nations. And you read in my bio some of that amazing work that I had the honor of being a part of during my time with them. And it was really the leaders of this region like to lovingly refer to my time with them as the Decho University, because they taught me a lot of the understandings that I've gained over the course of working with communities, our leaders, our youth, and our elders about what does it mean to take care of the land from a Dene perspective. And it's been through that work that that I've learned that for me and for our communities, it means really building our relationship to land. And so to do that in a Dene way, and what's beautiful about joining the ILI is that I've been able to more network and connect with more Indigenous communities all across the country. And what's so beautiful is I see our story reflected in their story when we connect about these issues. And it's because in our culture, our land is so sacred to who we are as peoples. And so to take care of land in a Dene way, or to take care of land in an Indigenous-led way, really means taking care of our relationship to that land and taking care of our relationship to each other. And in order to do that, we need to take approaches that strengthen not just our ability to monitor and understand the land around us, but also take care of our languages, our cultures, and our ways of life. And using that as the foundation for the ways and the approaches that we take, and for the decisions that then flow. And so what's beautiful about that is it inverts the sort of the knowledge dynamic between Indigenous and non-Indigenous ways of knowing. So instead of leading and developing a program that's more Western based and that we try and fit our traditional knowledge systems into it, we actually invert that and we say, actually, our knowledge and our way of life is the foundation for which we need to lead in taking care of land and nurturing our relationship to the land and to each other. And when you take that approach and when you invert it, it creates a completely different system and way of looking at the world around us. So that's been a lot of the work that I was engaged with here in this region, and I carry that forward into my roles with the ILI. And like I said, what I see as being so beautiful is I see that story reflected in all Indigenous communities all across the country when we connect on these issues. So,
thank you so much. So Eli, if you could tell us a bit about what you do at the Isak Olam Foundation, and also what Indigenous-led conservation means to you.
Yeah, thank you, Denise, and thank you, Dadi, for the opening prayer and for your words. I'm taken back to that teepee often at Aurora Village when the quote that we took for the video was about, when the land is healthy and when the language and culture is healthy, then the land will be healthy as well. And you're right. We hear that time and time again with nations that we're working with across Canada. I think of Albert Marshall and the unique way he shared the same idea. And so, yeah, my name's Eli Enns. I'm from Tlaoquiet, Nuu-chah-nulth Nation on the west coast of Vancouver Island on my dad's side of my family. And my mother was born in St. Boniface, Winnipeg, Manitoba. And we're Dutch Mennonite immigrants, immigrated from the Ukraine, actually, down to Mexico and then up to Canada in 1930, my grandfather. And as mentioned, I'm the president and CEO and co-founder of the Isak Olam Foundation. This organization is dedicated to education for the conservation and promotion of biocultural diversity. So that's exactly what Dati was talking about there, is that intersectionality of language and culture and biodiversity in the world, in the natural world. And the Isak Olam Foundation is dedicated to that ultimate purpose, predominantly through capacity development and knowledge mobilization. And, supporting the IPCA Knowledge Basket is an example of knowledge mobilization efforts through the CRP, as Isak Olam is a founding and co-lead organization of the CRP, as mentioned by Denise. But we're also, for example, involved in curriculum development. We're launching this fall the world's first advanced IPCA planning certificate in partnership with Vancouver Island University. And we also have developed curriculum for the University for Peace in Costa Rica, and looking at the intersectionality between dispute resolution and nature conservation. And another one of the outcomes of the Isak Olam Foundation is the IPCA Innovation Program in partnership with Make Way Canada. This program, we haven't started promoting it much yet, but we're off to a pretty solid start. We're launching the Pacific IPCA Innovation Center on Vancouver Island, and starting with the Clayoquot campus in Tofino, but looking forward to working with many others throughout the Pacific region. Awesome to see all of the shout outs happening in the chat there, and all the people from across Canada joining us. I look forward to today's conversation. Clayoquot. Thank you, Denise.
Thanks very much, Eli. So Frank, can you tell us a bit about all the different types of things that you do? And I won't call it your work, because last week when we were all saying hello, you said it's not work. That's not the way that you look at it. So can you tell us a bit about what you do and what Indigenous-led conservation means to you?
Yo, Nugwa Gladliasila. Hello, my name is Gladliasila. My English name is Frank Brown. I bring greetings to all of you online from the Hilfzach unceded territory, from the community of Bella Bella and what some people refer to as the Great Bear Rainforest, the largest intact coastal temperate rainforest region left in the world. And I've been, as I said, I don't really consider this my work. Like, I don't park my work at 5 o'clock. It's who I am as a Indigenous place-based people. Our people have lived on this land for millennia, over 14,000 years, according to carbon dating. What our people say, since the Creator put our first ancestors down on the land, in comparison to Canada as a nation state being 153 years old. And in fact, in our language, we don't even have a word for conservation. It's really about upholding our laws and the teachings that have sustained us in a sustainable way for 700 generations, back to the time when saber-toothed tigers and giant sloths roamed the Pacific Northwest. That's how long our people have existed on this coast, on the west coast of what is now referred to as Canada. And so we've learned a few things that we are willing to share. And I have been taught by my family, by my late uncle, but I also work as a senior advisor to the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, and have been involved in supporting the conservation economy within our traditional territories. And I'm really pleased to support this knowledge basket that has been developed to support the work, because I think we know that it's absolutely imperative going forward that we have to look at models of sustainability. Currently, we're dealing with heat domes, flooding, ocean acidification, big blobs, and it has a direct impact on Indigenous place-based people, in particular. The impacts on caribou and salmon on the West Coast. And so we are the voice of the land. We are the voice of the water, because we're connected to that and we have something to say. And we hope that through this knowledge basket and Indigenous-led conservation, that the broader society will heed our concerns and our voice around this issue. And we appreciate that finally that people are listening and giving space to the first peoples of this land.
Thanks very much, Frank. And Megan, if you could tell us a bit about what it is that you do and what Indigenous-led conservation means to you.
Thanks, Denise. Megan Leslie, and I'm coming to you from Ottawa, which is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. And I'm new to these lands in two senses, both in the sense of the greater arc of time as a settler, but also in the sense of immediate time, because I just moved here a few months ago and I'm very grateful to be living on and learning about these lands. And I work at WWF Canada. We're a conservation organization, and we're working towards a future where nature and people thrive. Both have to happen. And we're honored to be a collaborator on the Knowledge Basket project. And I'm profoundly honored to participate in this panel today. So when it comes to Indigenous-led conservation, what it means to me, Frank hit the nail on the head. I think there's a growing recognition of Indigenous knowledge systems and practices, and how these practices have actively stewarded biodiversity for millennia, including in many parts of Canada, what we call Canada. And so, First Nations, Métis, Inuit people have not just lived on these lands for longer than my ancestors even imagined that these lands existed, but they've been actively managing forests and grasslands and coasts, managing and stewarding these lands and stewarding biodiversity. And I think here in Canada, that growing recognition is also part of our journey of reconciliation, to embrace the fact that there are other approaches, there are other knowledge systems that can help us build more restorative approaches to nature. So what Indigenous-led conservation means to me at this moment in time, today, it's this opportunity for transforming our relationship with nature in a way that sees those stronger connections between human and nature. And that way of looking at our reliance on nature and our interconnectedness, I think, is essential to any journey we're going to take to tackle biodiversity loss. And I think that it's a gift. It's a gift. And for an organization like WWF in Canada, what does that mean for us? It means collaboration and support when Indigenous partners indicate an interest to work with organizations like ours, and using the resources that we have and the capacity that we have to support that Indigenous-led conservation.
Hi, Denise, can I add something there?
Sure, please do.
I realized I didn't answer your question about what Indigenous-led. Megan's so well organized with her thoughts there. One thing I want to say on that is I think the conventionally in the last 20 years or whatnot, when when people look to Indigenous knowledge systems in conservation, it's usually sort of plant or animal or ecosystem specific. And I think what Indigenous leadership in conservation, the real value, the opening offer is around social innovation, and also around framing the problem or reframing the problem. I think it's an oversimplification to just blame climate change. And, I've been on a bit of a rant about this lately is, the floods in Abbotsford last year, people blame climate change for that. But, when you talk to the Sumas First Nation and Chief Silver, shared with me years ago that whole area used to be a shallow lake, and it was a very important part of their economy for the sturgeon fish. And the newcomers saw the rich nutrients in the lake bed during the dry season, and so they wanted to keep it permanently dry, and through technology and science, drain that lake and keep it drained. And the elders at the time said, now you're creating problems for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, because eventually Mother Nature is going to take that lake back. And that's what we saw last year. And it's kind of naive just to blame climate change and then say, well, science will show us the way. Science will solve the problem. Well, I'm sorry, but science and technology created the problem. Because unfortunately, the way science and technology has been applied has been to increase profits and to be an extension of man's ego, humankind's ego, in believing that we can change nature and dominate nature and recraft the way that water moves. There's a really beautiful book that's been recently published called Slow Water or something like that, and Water Always Wins or something like this. And it's about how our so-called civilization has been built upon like 80% of the world's wetlands, and Mother Nature's going to take that back. So you better buckle in for the ride and start listening to Indigenous peoples, because that's what they forewarned against. And so, yes, Indigenous leadership in conservation is about better understanding plants and animals and nature, but there's also a social innovation and framing the problem that is clear and present for us today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eli. So I think I'll start this one with Frank. Over the past several years, we have seen growing recognition of Indigenous-led conservation across Canada and maybe even worldwide. Can you reflect on what it's taken to get to where we are?
Thank you for the question. In order to answer it, you have to reflect back on the colonial history of Canada and the impact it's had on our people. It's been very harmful, devastating, and our people are still reeling from the legislative and public policies that were instituted to separate us from our land and from the water and our livelihoods. And so we, at one time, our system of governance on the West Coast, the potlatch was banned, and we couldn't hire lawyers to fight for our rights to live. We weren't considered humans by the governments. We were wards of the government. And so there was never a acquiescing. We never gave up. There was people that held on to those teachings, and we're fortunate that those people that held on to those teachings, that knowledge transfer in the face of these huge horrific impacts like residential schools, they kept the language alive and continued to do that work. And eventually we were able to hire lawyers, and we've gone to court and won in the Supreme Court over 200 times. And there's Section 35 won the inherent right to self-determination as an example. Now we've got UNDRIP, the right to self-determination and supporting Indigenous nationhood. And so that's what it's taken to get here, to be able to create the space to have our voice about being in relationship to place in the various bioregions across this country and across the world. And so there is a recognition that, that there is wisdom, there's an innate, path forward, because through multiple generations, there's been a learning, there's been a clash of values where originally it was about exploiting resources for primarily financial gain at all costs. And I think that what we offer is the notion of reflecting on the necessity of being able to shift our values, that we're not just coming and taking the wealth of the land and leaving, but we are all now here to stay, and we got to work together, and we got to figure this out and how we can go forward. And I didn't answer the question, my closing comment about what does Indigenous-led conservation mean to you. What it means to me is upholding our responsibility, to stay the course, to stay alive. We did a publication on that in the International Year of Biodiversity. It was a paper called the Coastal First Nations Fundamental Truths Regarding Sustainability, Stewardship, and Biodiversity. And Gloria Webster Cranmer, a knowledge keeper whose father was put in Ocala prison for potlatching, said, we didn't create this problem, but we have to stay the course to stay alive. And that became the title of this publication, to hold on to our teachings, to continue to exist as who we are as the first people of this land. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Frank. Dati, would you like to reflect on what it's taken to get to the point that we are now, where Indigenous-led conservation is being more widely recognized and respected?
I can't help but agree with Frank, and in fact, he shared a lot of some of my own reflections in his words about how to really think back about why in today's day that there's a growing recognition for the value of our knowledge systems and our peoples. You really need to look behind us and see what we walked through as communities, and that colonial history had a huge impact. I remember as a young girl not really understanding why I couldn't speak our language, and feeling very alienated from my own community and my own family members. My grandparents were unilingual. They did not speak English. So it was very confusing. And as a young person, you don't understand why. You can't connect the dots, what's happened, why things are the way they are. And it wasn't until I grew up and was able to sort of grow and learn and study that I started to learn how to connect the dots, what those colonial traumas did to our communities, what they did to our families, what they did to my family. And sorry, I get a little bit emotional thinking about it. It stands out to me because I remember my older brother, Amos, thanking the generation that came before us for holding on to those teachings, because they really had to go through hell and fire to do that. And so my generation is trying to claim those teachings and grow them within ourselves so that we can pass it on. And it's a big question, like why now? Like why is people around us starting to recognize and value our knowledge and our people? Because when I look behind me, I see those that came before me leading that way and using their voice and their agency to say, we're here, we matter, our knowledge is valuable. It seems that there's been a bit of awakening happening across the country about what this history is. When I was young, nobody talked about these sorts of impacts. Nobody talked about residential school. So it was really hard to connect these dots. Whereas now it's become part of our societal conversation. It's become part of our reconciliation journey as a country. And I think that awakening is so important. I think it's helped lead to an understanding of why our knowledge and our systems are valuable. I think our changing environment is a growing challenge for all of us to contend with. And I think we're all looking for solutions. And so I think all of these things play a role. I also know that at the forefront, there's been some really important voices. The Indigenous Leadership Initiative, the work that's being launched through this knowledge basket, the work Eli's been doing with his foundation, and others have been doing that work of translating between two worlds. In our culture, in Clincho, there's a Clincho saying where I'm from, that in order to thrive and be successful into the future, you need to be strong like two people. And it's just that knowledge, that acknowledgement that, you need to strengthen who you are as a Denning person, but you also need to learn how to be strong in a modern world. And at the forefront of this movement, there's been a lot of people working to be strong like two people, to bring these sorts of knowledge systems together, and doing that important translation work of why this worldview matters and how it can help this one. And, Eli, in your opening comments, you talked about how one worldview has been used predominantly to make decisions up to this point. And that worldview has led to a world that we exist in now. And it's created, there's value and there's strengths, it's created problems as well. And you can't rely on that same worldview to fix the problems it created. And so I feel like there's such a, it is such a gift that we bring to the table in bringing forward a whole new way of looking at the world around us. That's very natural and inherent to us as Indigenous people, but that we're trying to teach and share that way of seeing things with others. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And, if I could add my own observation, I don't think that it's a coincidence that the respect for Indigenous conservation knowledge happens at the same time that finally Canadians as a whole have had to, really face the history because of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because of the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls inquiry. I don't think it's a surprise or a coincidence that those things would happen at the same time. So Eli, if you could let me know your reflections on what it's taken to get to this point where we are today.
Getting me all emotional there, Dottie. As I was listening to you, I was reflecting upon, I guess predictions or prophecies. The word prophecy has a lot of stigma around it, I guess. But predictions that were made, and I've heard stories from the Gwich'in, from the Mi'kmaq on the East Coast, and New Channel, where I'm from, about first contact. And the Treaty of Fort Niagara in 1764, elders, the old people who were alive at that time, predicted all those difficulties and the hard times that Dati speaks of, that, the generation above us and before that endured. And they predicted that that these hard times would be brought upon us, and that when things are on the brink of total self-destruction, that the great-grandchildren of the newcomers will come to our great-grandchildren, and they will ask for help and guidance on how to see our way out of this problem together. And so the old people back then said, so there's a hard task ahead of you, that not only do you have to maintain and keep alive our teachings about how to live the good life and how to understand, the interconnection of all things and the interdependency of all things. But you also, in addition to that, you have to have love and forgiveness in your heart when that day comes and the great-grandchildren of the newcomers come to our great-grandchildren for help and guidance. And I think that second part, in some ways, is the hardest part, because there's a part of us that wants to, that's angry and hurt and violated and healing from those genocidal policies and such. And so, but I've seen that myself, attending gatherings across Canada. The one that always sticks out in my mind was in Kananaskis in Treaty 7 country, seeing the elders from those nations generously and with humility sharing a pipe ceremony with some of the organizational leadership of some of these newcomer organizations like hunting and fishing associations that oftentimes harbor some of the most racist perspectives and behavior towards our people. But to see that humility and that generosity from the elders there, it really stuck with me. And, we have dozens and dozens of Nelson Mandelas and Desmond Tutus running around this country, continuing the work of exactly what those old people predicted all those years ago. And so, yes, it was. And there's a moment, like, I think for myself anyways, I was impacted by residential schools and whatnot in my own way. I probably got off easy compared to most people, but there's a point in your healing journey or whatever when, rather than having regret, we recognize that those things were necessary to make us who we are today, and to prepare us for the challenges that we have to face. So I guess that's my answer to how we got to where we are today. And I have a lot of hope in my heart, and I get that from the elders, that because right below the surface, we have our shared humanity that will get us through this challenge together. And right below the surface in nature, Mother Nature has an incredible capacity to heal and restore and multiply and diversify. And so I want to end on that note of hope. Thank you, Denise.
Thanks very much, Eli. So Megan, as someone who comes from the non-Indigenous environmental movement, which can often, replicate a lot of these harms, what do you think it's taken to come to where we are today?
Yeah, picking up on both Eli and Dati about, one worldview has gotten us to where we are today. And that's absolutely true when you think about like this global system that is degrading the planet and commodifying the planet. But also even those of us trying to do good. I'm at a conservation organization trying to fix things. But Eli pointed out, that traditional way of looking at one species of plant or one species of animal isn't thinking about how nature is this, holistic, integrated thing. And there's an opportunity here for organizations like mine to recognize that our historical approaches to conservation, those approaches aren't working. I mean, let's face it, like we are continuing to see species decline for decades. And I think that we need to fundamentally understand our relationship with nature, and that relationship needs to change, like what Eli was describing, the whole, not just about one species. And we need to tackle the root causes of biodiversity loss. And for, organizations like mine, we have to remember that Indigenous territories have higher species diversity than other areas. So the very fact that they are more species rich ought to tell you that we have a lot to learn from Indigenous peoples and communities. And I do agree, things have changed, like you said, Denise, over the past several years. There is a better understanding and appreciation of Indigenous knowledge systems and relationships with the land by organizations like mine, by colonial governments. And I think, that's obviously, that is a good thing. We're in an urgent moment. When you ask about, to reflect on the journey here, and maybe I'll share two couple turning points for me as an individual. I would say the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action didn't include any conservation actions per se, but there is an obligation for people like me to look at those calls to action and think about what is my role, or what is the role of my organization in reconciliation and resurgence. And so for conservation, how can we use conservation as a tool for reconciliation and resurgence? So that was one moment that crystallized things for me. The other, I will say, is the work of the Indigenous Circle of Experts, what Eli was a part of, and specifically their really strong insistence that we develop ethical space in our work. And that idea of, if we focus on ethical space, we're creating a place for knowledge systems to interact with respect, mutual respect, with kindness and generosity, and these kinds of principles, and this recognition that knowledge systems are equal, that one doesn't have more weight or legitimacy than the other. So those were two moments where I had to take real stock of, what can I do with the resources that I have at my organization to support this work and to do things differently, because what we've been doing has not been working.
Thanks very much, Megan. So there's still obviously a lot more work to do to ensure Indigenous leadership remains in its rightful place in decisions around conservation. From your perspective, what do you think is required to make that happen? Eli, why don't we start with you?
Can you ask that question one more time?
Sure. There's still more work to do to ensure Indigenous leadership remains in its rightful place in decisions around conservation. So I guess for me, the question would be, how can we make sure that this trajectory continues, that there isn't any lip service or backsliding, and actually the gains continue in terms of Indigenous-led conservation?
Yeah, well, I think that there needs to be a continuation of some sort of a high level. We put it all in our report, the We Rise Together report. We recommended a sub-regional distinctions-based approach moving forward, to continue the work of the ICE at a sub-regional distinctions-based level in Canada. And we kind of just grabbed the steering wheel on that one, and through the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership and through the IPCA Innovation Program, and the innovation centers, the 3 legacy outcomes, supporting the knowledge basket, I guess, is one way that we create a permanent reservoir of good practices and lessons learned, stories of success and failure, that sharing of knowledge and experience is really key to the ongoing future success. These innovation centers, I think, are going to be really key, because what we're doing there is we're creating lasting cooperative capacity between civil society, academia, private sector, philanthropy, that is assembled, gathering and galvanizing the supportive elements to support Indigenous-led conservation of nature. That's, government are the only ones, as per the definition of an IPCA, they're the only ones that can create an IPCA through invoking their agency as nations, and as also as Section 35 rights holders to create IPCAs. Well, that leadership is key. And second to that, we need to gather and galvanize the supportive elements, civil society, philanthropic, private sector, academia, so on and so forth. So regardless of who's in government, regardless of the political whims that come and go, that we have that lasting cooperative capacity in place to support ongoing leadership in conservation of nature by Indigenous peoples. We need to continue to foster a paradigm shift. I think, the TRC, there was one quote from the TRC about how reconciliation between Crown and Indigenous peoples can never happen until there's reconciliation with the land, reconciling our relationship with the land collectively as a species. Invoking Section 35 agency isn't just about rights. Like Mr. Brown said there, it's about our responsibilities. And so that paradigm shift is key to rethinking what it means to be human, and what it means to be human in relation to the rest of creation and the universe. And that paradigm shift, I think, is key to maintaining the course. I think we are shifting. It's important to uncover these mass graves and for people to understand that this genocidal legacy that we've all inherited is not fiction, but it's fact. But Indigenous nations are not just victims of those things. We are innovators, and we are solution finders, and we're nation builders at the end of the day. As Mr. Brown said, this isn't an occupation. It's not a job or a career path. It's our existence. Another Indigenous political philosopher said that being born Indigenous in this country means being born into politics. And I think it also comes with that responsibility, a grandmother's responsibility. And so I think, continued paradigm shift, investing in that cooperative capacity and these lasting reservoirs of good practices and experience will be the way forward. Thank you for the question, Denise.
Thanks very much. So Datu, what do you think? There's still more work to do to ensure Indigenous leadership remains in its rightful place in decisions and discussions around conservation. How can we ensure that happens?
I'm going to be quick because my little guy just wandered upstairs here, so he may interrupt my little spiel here quickly. But from my perspective, it's resources. A lot of resources have gone into supporting and growing and creating and developing one worldview and one system. We need resources to do that for ours. There's been a whole colonial history that's taken away resourcing, that's taken away capacity, that's done a lot of harm to our communities and our knowledge and our people. So it doesn't just heal itself overnight. We need to invest into the healing of our communities so that we actually are in a place to offer these gifts back, that we actually have the strength of our language and our culture and our knowledge. Oh, and of course he did decide to join. It's resourcing not just for the actual work happening at the ground level. It's also resourcing our health and wellness. It's resourcing our young to go get educated and be knowledgeable, and making sure that this generation is able to continue sharing the gift that is our knowledge system.
Thanks very much. Frank, what do you think in terms of making sure?
That's a good question and an important question. We had a fight to get to where we are. I think that in order for the momentum to continue to move forward, I agree with Dati about necessary resourcing, and our greatest resource is our people. We need to invest in our young people, because they're the ones, like what Dati said again about her generation and the younger generation are the ones that are the language champions. They're the ones that are learning the songs, learning the ceremonies, and kind of breaking away from the projected shame that was put on our people. So I think that it's not going to happen overnight. There's higher level drivers like UNDRIP that have given direction, truth and reconciliation recommendations, and it goes on and on. But I think it's really about how do we move forward as a society to give effect to the work and to hold space. The ILI did a good publication on how to be a good ally. I noticed that was shared, allowing our people to have stand in their truth about their lived experiences, as was mentioned by Eli, we're basically living a trauma existence. And so being trauma informed about who you're working with. So being a good ally, but also recognizing that, you know, there's a lot of history and impacts that have to be navigated. As far as the conservation work goes, you know, because of the responsibility and rights that we fought for as the first peoples of this land, you know, that's where it goes into, is that legal fight, the question of those rights and responsibilities, of whether it's related to the land or the water. Like example on the West Coast here is, you know, we've been embattled over herring. You know, our fishery that we participate in is a roe on kelp, and we take the roe from after the herring lay their eggs on the kelp, and we don't kill herring. But, you know, there's endangered orca in the south in the Salish Sea. And, you know, this is a method, a real method that of fishing that generates, you know, up to $6 million for up to 600 fishers, tribal members, real benefits in a bona fide fishing community. And we're embattled with other governments to implement the legal direction under the Supreme Court, the Gladstone decision that recognized our right to harvest and sell roe on kelp prior to BC joining Confederation. So, you know, how do we support that leadership? And, you know, in the face of these, I remember being embattled and people saying, you don't even know what you're talking about. And you know, some fishers on boats, and we had to stand up for the herring. And we had the war in the woods. We had to stand up for the fish, for the timber, all of the resources on the land and the water. And that's the other part of it, is there's a mischaracterization a lot of times, and people say that we're anti-development. That's absolutely untrue. Our people support a conservation-based development approach because we depend on that resource for our livelihood. People come in and extract resources and leave, go to the cities, go to the urban centers, and that sustains them there. But we're the ones that are saying, hey, there's no more salmon, there's no more fish. The other thing is, if Indigenous-led conservation is going to thrive, then we have to remove the barriers of environmental colonialism. We have to have direct links to the resources that are available in a real and meaningful way that go directly to our own governments, to our own communities, to our own institutions, and not have an environmental filter, not have a government filter, not have an industry filter, but that deals directly with the first people of this land. That's how we're going to hold space and continue to do the work that we need to do. You know, I remember how polarizing this was, you know, because it's as if you have to choose one or the other. And we don't. We have to figure out how we can make this work for us as a collective society for our future generations. And so, you know, whether it's governments padding their operational budgets and they announce that so much money is going to First Nations conservation, and when you start to unpack it and you realize that there isn't that much coming to the Native people, but the public saying, oh, we're giving our tax dollars to the Indians. But when you see what's really going on, or dollars flowing through environmental groups who are padding their administrative budgets, or industry trying to basically co-opt the process. And then we have to sit and analyze that and figure out what's going to be best over the long term, so that investment into the capacity of Indigenous stewardship is an absolute necessity to move forward in a real and meaningful way, because we don't want to be set up for failure by being inadequately resourced financially and with human resources, and to be able to engage government to government, truly. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Megan, do you have any thoughts on ensuring that Indigenous leadership stays at the forefront of conservation efforts?
Yeah, and I'd like to keep going with Frank and Dati talking about resources, and specifically folks who are watching from my sector, right? The conservation sector, the non-Indigenous conservation sector. Remember that this isn't just theoretical work. This isn't about like, oh yes, we agree with the principles of ethical space, and of course we'll prioritize Indigenous knowledge and we'll tick that box. What does this mean in practice? If you are from an organization like mine, if you're a non-Indigenous conservation practitioner, I want you to lean in and listen. Put your money where your mouth is. And it's not just like, oh, but I'm a charity. We don't have very much money. Resources are tight. You have lots of resources. Resources they come in different packages. So just stop and think, what do we have? What resources do we have to add to this community of practice to support Indigenous-led work? Maybe it's technical skills. Do you have people who have mapping expertise, or hydrophones to track the sounds of the whales, or drones, or data analysis? You do. You have some of those resources. You have fundraising capacity. You fundraise for your own work. You have expertise. So can you support grant writing for work that isn't just your own, but in support of Indigenous-led conservation? Can you offer support for government relations to ensure that the perspectives of Indigenous partners are being brought to decision makers? How can you use your resources? Resources is a big word. It encompasses a lot of things. How do you use your resources of your organization and you personally, your skills, to advance these goals? Ask yourself, how can I be of service? And I also think that the mainstream conservation sector needs to be very clear and articulate almost daily that we're not that we're working to also advance Indigenous people's rights and goals, that this isn't just another colonial construct to figure out how we can further marginalize Indigenous peoples or colonize Indigenous territory. If we're going to truly embrace the transformational elements of Indigenous-led conservation, then at its core, we need to articulate and know that it's about advancing Indigenous rights and governance and knowledge systems and culture. And we have to repeat that continually to ensure that that's what is motivating us. That is how we are of service in this struggle.
Great, thank you so much. And so before we get into the audience questions, I have one question specifically about why we're here today. Today, the CRP is announcing the launch of the IPCA Knowledge Basket. Why is this platform needed, and why now? Eli, would you like to start?
Sure. So in the ICE process, the Indigenous Circle of Experts for the Pathway to Target 1, we produced the We Rise Together report. Along with our written report, we established an oral narrative called the Four Moose narrative. And these four moves, it started off as, in that narrative is capacity development, and recognizing that it's not enough just to throw money or to have big hairy goals, increasing now parks and protected areas to 30% of the country by 2030. We're sitting at about 12.8%. And if you throw a lot of money behind that, a lot of energy, political will, all that is important. But the danger is in such a short time frame, when you already have precarious relationships across the country, the danger is damaging relationships further and or ending up with stranded assets where you put a bunch of money, create a paper park. Maybe you meet your spatial targets, but you're actually just ending up with stranded assets. And so the capacity development is a really key kind of, let's call it like a risk management in that regard. And also, making sure that it's authentic and that there's, long-term lasting transformative changes that are happening here, not just photo shoots for big announcements and such. So this is what led to the founding, and I want to acknowledge Steve and Nita. I don't know if he's in the crowd, but Stephen, Nita, and myself and Robin Roth got together on the phone in 2017 and agreed to go after this partnership funding for the CRP and bringing our organizations together, ILI and ISAQLAM with the University of Guelph. And early on in that process, Stephen was an active member of the Indigenous Circle of Experts and oftentimes helping to chaperone conversations with myself as co-chair. After our first regional gathering in 2017, we met as a committee in Nanaimo, and collectively the committee decided, because in our terms of reference originally, we had implementation guidance. You know, the ministers responsible were looking for implementation guidance. And given the terms of reference, our committee, by consensus, agreed to drop implementation guidance. We felt like we didn't have enough time within the given time frame to in producing our report. But we never let that go. And it was, I think it was a meeting in Fredericton. Stephen and I got together around a dinner table and a napkin and started drawing out what a framework for implementation guidance could look like. And that was taking the 4 moose plus you know, like jurisdictional, financial capacity and cultural keystone species, and then looking at different audience groups and recognizing that implementation guidance needs to be tailored to different audience groups. The obvious ones are Indigenous governments themselves, federal government agencies, provinces, territories, regional, municipal governments, civil society and academia, private sector and philanthropy. But there's also a role for the general public in ensuring the success of IPCAs. There's also a role for engaging the international community. And so we sketched that out all those, you know, now years ago. And that implementation guidance ended up first for a period of time becoming the solutions bundle, and has evolved into the IPCA knowledge basket. And so, as mentioned previously, this is going to be one of the 3 legacy outcomes of the CRP. We're only you know, not even midway completely through. We're about midway. And we're already starting to launch our legacy outcomes. So I'm really proud of all of the people who helped make that a reality. You know, Allison and Christy, Sude, Monica Shore, a variety of people who labored in the technical side. And of course, our web designers. We're really excited about the functional and aesthetic elements of the IPCA knowledge basket. And also, you know, recognizing the contributions from WWF and David Suzuki Foundation and Ducks Unlimited and you know, hopefully others will come forward with financial contributions to ensuring that this knowledge basket has wheels going forward into the future. And so I don't know if I answered the question concisely, but that's my long answer to your short question there, Denise.
Thanks very much. I think I may have, you're supposed to give an intro to the knowledge basket after, and so I may have asked you too early, and you did sort of squish those together. But before we see the video, Dati, do you have anything that you'd like to say about the knowledge basket and why the platform is needed now, especially?
I think it's all part of that building and growing the momentum around Indigenous leadership in this work all across the country. And in the work that I've been involved with, learning from others who've gone before, learning how they've approached challenges, how they've achieved successes were incredibly fundamental in our own journey into finding our own leadership in conservation. And so I think this is exciting because it gives Indigenous communities and leadership another tool to use in striving to do all the great work that we're so wanting to gift to others. And so from my perspective, just helping to build those connections between Indigenous communities is so fundamental and so necessary. And so I celebrate the basket just for that.
Thanks so much. And Frank, why do you think the IPCA Knowledge Basket now is the perfect time?
I guess a simple response might be knowledge mobilization. So there has been quite a bit of good work done, but you have to have a plan to mobilize that knowledge. Otherwise, it just sits there. And unfortunately, that does happen at times. A lot of good work gets done, but it doesn't move. And this is through the knowledge basket is the opportunity to mobilize these learnings, this collaborative work that's being done. I hold my hands up for this incredible work. And, there's another example of the important work is like the lobbying that occurred with the ILI to secure the 25 million for a national pilot for guardians, which grew over 5 years from 20 programs to over 80 across the country. And, of course, there's the Indigenous protected and conserved areas that are a very important part of like what T said, referred to as the gift, because the Native people of this land are more or less helping Canada to achieve its international commitments to the 25% biodiversity conservation by 2025 and 30% by 2030. And it's through this work that we're going to achieve that. And in community, that knowledge basket and the process and the learning that has occurred over the last few years is very critical to transfer that so that it could grow exponentially as the Guardian programs have. And my concern around this process is, it might stop if the political pendulum swings in a different direction, and then all of this work, is that has been set up. Like, we're finally being heard, but we also have to recognize that there is a faction in society who are anti-Indian, that are anti-Native. And they don't support this. They see this as more of being a drain on the country. And some people have selective memory and a short memory. What happened when people came to this land? They basically made a commitment. They made an agreement in the form of treaties. And they said that, in exchange for land, we're going to provide services. And a lot of times that wasn't honored. Most of the time, actually, it wasn't honored. And so this is about the relationship between Canadians and the Native people who have agreements to do this work. And I agree. This is a gift. It's very timely to be able to advance this, because it's not only for us. This is for Canadian society and the world, because climate change and biodiversity loss doesn't know regional, provincial, or national boundaries. The salmon and the caribou travel across these boundaries, and it's this country has a huge landmass from coast to coast to coast. And we're the ones that are dealing with the front line of these impacts. And so this knowledge basket mobilization is critical for knowledge mobilization, so we can address these issues in a timely manner.
Thanks very much. And so before we see the video, Megan, do you have anything to say about why the Knowledge Basket platform is needed now?
Well, Denise, you started off by asking us about the journey to getting where we are today. This is the moment. This is the moment to make sure that the tools and resources that are out there are available to communities, that there aren't barriers to accessing and creating a community of practice where we can access those kinds of tools. And it's also a forum for knowledge exchange, so that it's unique. What this knowledge basket does, it's unique. And I do think that the mere existence of this knowledge basket is incredible because it enshrines the rights of Indigenous peoples by advancing Indigenous governance in conservation. One other thing I'll add, just another reason why now is the moment. There is an opportunity at this moment for global change. Because in Canada, you see the journey we're talking about here in Canada, that's also happening on the global stage. And Canada is a participant in some of that work. So things like the High Ambition Coalition or, the Global Biodiversity Agenda and our participation there. And I think internationally, the conservation community is looking for examples. And here in Canada, we are ahead of other countries when it comes to recognizing both the importance and the need for supporting Indigenous-led conservation and the role of Indigenous knowledge in conservation. So I think that this can also have a profound influence on conservation around the world.
All right, so before we get into the intro video, Eli, did you have anything else to say about the launch of the Knowledge Basket that you didn't get to yet?
I think I said it all there, but no, I just want to thank everyone who's contributed so far, and let's have a looky-loo there.
All right, so I think Ella is going to start sharing a video.
Indigenous people are the guardians for future generations. Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, or IPCAs, is a newer term used to describe activities that Indigenous peoples have been engaged in for millennia, caring for the lands and waters through natural law and Indigenous governance systems. The IPCA Knowledge Basket is a resource originating with the Indigenous Circle of Experts, also known as ICE, and the Pathway to Canada Target 1 initiative. From 2017 to 2018, ICE members led a national effort to consider how IPCAs could be recognized and created in Canada. Their work culminated in the We Rise Together report, which included 28 recommendations. This process revealed that a digital platform could provide Indigenous governments, as well as their partners, with information to help fulfill their IPCA visions. The IPCA Knowledge Basket was created collaboratively with guidance from the National Elders Lodge, former members of ICE, and a diverse range of partners from across what is now referred to as Canada. Basket weaving is a significant cultural practice for many Indigenous peoples. The IPCA Knowledge Basket represents the strength and beauty we can create by weaving multiple knowledge systems together through a two-eyed seeing approach to support Indigenous-led conservation. The website provides pathways for visitors to harvest, collect, and contribute resources to enhance our collective knowledge. It is a space for reciprocal sharing and collaborative learning in the spirit of We Rise Together. The IPCA Knowledge Basket represents hope for the future. It is a continuation of the vision brought forward by Indigenous leaders from generations past. After a 5-year journey and the generous contributions of many, the IPCA Knowledge Basket has found a home. By visiting this space, you too have become a part of the IPCA Knowledge Basket story. Thank you for joining us on this walk.
Woo!
All right, that was awesome. Congratulations to everyone who was involved in making this happen. I can't wait to look at it personally. So let's see, we have some questions here. Sorry. So this one, do you have any advice on how best to approach communities as an outside conservation organization to build that trust and relationship to support their conservation efforts on their territories? There are a number of questions sort of in this vein. So if existing conservation authorities or groups would like to support or work with local nations, do you have any advice of where or how they should start? Let's see, Dati, would you like to start?
I'll try. If I could summarize the question to like how to be a good partner with our communities in this work, kind of how I'm interpreting that question. And I'm also just want to acknowledge all the wonderful questions posted in the chat. I've been reading them as they've been coming in. It's so wonderful to have such an engaged audience. The reality is that our communities are very under-resourced and operating over capacity or under capacity or whatever is the right framing to say that they're stretched thin. And so to be a good, I think this vein kind of is coming up in a lot of the questions that I've seen. It means you need to be very mindful of that reality, and as best as possible, approach your partnership in a solutions way. If you can bring resources to the table, or if you can build a collaborative, trusting partnership, so that way you're helping to shoulder some of the burden of that partnership. That's ideal. I always like to advocate that, in order for us to be successful in this work, we actually can't do it alone. In all of the work I did and all of the successful examples I see, there's partnership at the heart of all of it. And so there's very much a lot of room for non-Indigenous partners in this work, and not just room, but they're actually necessary space for them in many ways. So I feel like that's a very vague answer to a very specific question. But the reality is that there isn't a simple answer, because it's going to be a bit varied based on whichever community that you're working with. And really, it's best to ask them, how can we be a good partner to you? And what does that look like? So maybe I'll pass the baton to another panelist in their attempt.
Well, thanks for mentioning that sometimes the community is under-resourced in a way that they might not be able to even work on the projects that they would like to prioritize, because someone did mention that in one of the questions along those lines. So Frank, do you have any advice on how best to approach communities as an outside conservation organization who would like to support Indigenous-led conservation?
I would say do your homework, because a lot of times what happens is, as well-intentioned as somebody's interest is, it can be draining to the community, especially if there's capacity issues. And a lot of times, within a community, you can count on one hand who's doing all of the work. And this just ends up being another thing to have to do. And then that relationship becomes extractive to us, because it's in the form of time. And so bringing solutions matters. That, again, just referring to the ILI being a good ally document, I think is a good resource. So before you engage with the community, know who you're engaging with. Don't come with preconceived ideas. I remember this one group that wanted to, without naming names, an environmental group wanted to come and take some of our land and put it into private trusts. And why would we alienate our land to somebody else's control when we're fighting for our land, fighting for what is ours? And to alienate the land further, death by 1,000 lashes. So people need to check themselves in their own thinking around what does it mean to support Indigenous-led conservation. And then my closing comment is around this, what I've kind of characterized, it's a bit of a metaphor of a decision tree. And I came back home to my community of Bella Bella after working as the Director of Land and Marine Stewardship for the coastal First Nations, the Central Coast, North Coast, and Haida Gwaii. And I came back to organize the tribal canoe journeys because our community was going to be hosting it here in Bella Bella. And so I had to give my head a shake, as part of my transition. I said, where did this really mean? And where did that because you get caught up in the technical aspects of the work, land use planning, marine use planning, government to government, it just goes on and on, becomes really technically detailed. And where I kind of landed was this metaphor of a decision tree. This might inform people's thinking about that engagement with our communities, because what the truth of it is, people are coveting something from the native people of the land, and it's usually through a corporate entity, whether it's a forest corporation, mining corporation, energy corporation, environmental, not-for-profit, whatever. And there's an angle, and we're always very guarded. What is this? What is their angle? What do they want from us? And so for what we've been about is building institutional capacity through the establishment of integrated resource management offices on a stewardship arm. That's a branch of the tree. And then on the other side is the economic development corporations. And I've been the chair of our development corporation, and I was the founding director of our integrated resource management office. So I could get to see it from different perspectives. And so what do these groups want? And if they want to come in and engage. And so my question is, does this comply with our land use plan and our marine use plans? Does it comply with ecosystem-based management? And if it does, and so there's a flow to this, and that's what this knowledge basket supports: is institutional capacity with Native communities. The proponent comes in and is coveting something off of the Native lands or waters. They engage, goes to leadership, gets farmed out to the stewardship office. If it complies, then it could go to economic development to look at a IBA, a JV, or something along those lines. And at the heart of this is the lands and resources, the water, and the people, the main stem of that. And then you have these branches of stewardship and economic development, and then it comes back to leadership. They can make an informed decision, and then if there is merit to the idea, it can go back out to the community, to the people, because that's what leadership is there to kind of vet these processes. And so think about your interest in the context of what this Indigenous group is about around their own nationhood and their own self-determination. So that's a context only. And using this metaphor helped me to kind of make sense of all of this process. So I hope that helps to inform the thinking around this type of a question and support that institutional capacity building of the Native communities. And that's what UNDRIP is about. Free, prior, and informed consent, the institutional capacity for our people to make informed decisions about their own destiny. And that's what this knowledge basket does.
Thanks very much, Frank. Eli, what would your recommendations be for non-Indigenous groups that want to work with communities? And if you had a specific example, that might be helpful to sort of explain how it actually worked in the real world.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of thoughts go through my mind. thinking back, I think it was 2010 or so that Robin Roth brought a group of people together around a small shirk project, and it was about how environmental organizations can work better with Indigenous peoples. And one of the metaphors that came out was this idea of ice cream. If you have a relationship with somebody, and the only thing you ever want to talk about when you go and see that person is just talk about ice cream all the time, it's a unidimensional relationship. It's not a real relationship. It's an agenda-driven relationship. And the next thought that goes through my mind related to that is something Monica Shore said about how the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region, when she was working with them and was charged with the responsibility of engaging the local First Nations in the Biosphere Reserve, she said she was advising to others, like she just made friends. She made friends with people. And to me, that speaks to this idea of ice cream, because so oftentimes, and it's really difficult, particularly with government, but if you're an employee of an organization and you have a job description and you have deliverables, it's really difficult not to be just an ice cream person, that you just want to talk about what's on your agenda and what you have to accomplish. Otherwise, you might lose your job. And with government, it's even more predetermined what you can talk about and what you can't talk about. So that's a bureaucratic look inside the way your own organizations are structured, and the bureaucracies that always maintain institutional relationships rather than human relationships. And I think that's what has long-lasting impact, is when you can have a human relationship that isn't just focused on one dimension of reality. And then, yes, the thing is that, okay, well, another piece of advice I give to pretty much everyone is get to know who you are. We deal with a lot of people who present themselves as job descriptions and job titles and such. In preparing to make contact and develop relationships, it's important to know who you are. I've met so many people who don't know their own history, where they're from, and this country even. And it's important to like Frank was saying, to do your homework. And that also creates an organizational commitment, that an organization has to support their employees to become better at building relationships, and knowing who you are as a people and as an organization, and what this country is for one as well. And then, to end, this is particularly true during the pandemic. A lot of communities didn't want to engage. Number one, because the fear of bringing in COVID-19, and number two, some technical challenges in engaging with the Zoom affair of, what ensued, even as something as simple as bandwidth for internet connectivity. And so in the meantime, there are ways to improve your organization's core capacity and competencies on how to to be well-versed in advance. And that's what these IPCA innovation centers can offer, is a way to organize those willing, an army of the willing, private sector. The folks that are signing up, they're not experts themselves in how to do this. They have expertise in something that they want to commit and devote to collective solutions. And so these innovation centers, we borrowed from a pre-existing model called the Organization for Tropical Studies, OTS. And what they do is they kind of manage logistics of faculty and researchers from 50 universities around the world that are interested in tropical studies to come and and ensure that on the ground logistical support is provided for people coming from various places to the Central America or South Africa. But they also did a running gap. They perform a running gap analysis, so they minimize redundancy in that research fatigue. In this case, so that the innovation centers can help channel those interests to connect. The CRP, which is a bit of a scaffolding for these legacy outcomes, and then depending on where your region is, can click you in to the regional IPCA innovation centers that are underway in different parts of the country. Chew.
Thanks very much. So Megan, what have you learned about working with communities? And if you felt open to it, I know that in my career as a journalist, learning how to tell Indigenous stories, I've made certain mistakes or have gotten better at certain things. So if there's anything that you've gotten better at that you'd like to share, that would be really helpful.
I thought you were going to ask me for an example, and they're too mortifying. But I've been that person. I have been that person being like, hey, Indigenous community, we're doing the thing. You should help us with the thing. And it's like, I've done it. And for organizations like mine, I mean, in some ways we come by it honestly. We can talk about, government is so bureaucratic, but so are we. Many of us have boards and we report to the board. Many of us have key performance indicators that we have to evaluate every quarter so the board can say, yes, things are going well. We have fundraising goals. We have, strategic plans that say, goal A sub 2.1 needs to be done by quarter 3. So it can be really easy to kind of exist like that. When all that stuff is just about governance and, put it away. How, instead of saying, I have to get this issue done by a Q3, target A point 2, and hey, Indigenous community, can you help me with this? Can you turn that around? Can you put that stuff down and say, hey, Frank, you're working on this thing and it looks like I could help. We've got some staff who'd be really interested in doing, we've got some technical capabilities that might make, could it help you? Could these technical things that we have help you in the work that you are already doing on your own timeline to your own ends? It can be really hard for us to step out of that little governance box that we're held to. But we've got to, there were comments in the chat about it taking time to build relationships. That's not done by the third quarter, right? There's comments about checking, yes, we have an Indigenous partner. Check that on the funding application. Whoa, what if we switch that around? And what if I'm the partner, the conservation organization partner to an Indigenous community that is leading work, so they could check the tick box, let me be the tick box. So it's hard. And, I've made a ton of mistakes, and try not to bring those mistakes into the future, but we can do it.
And sorry, I'm trying to read all the questions in the chat at the same time. Frank, if you had a chance to answer this question, I'm sorry that I missed that, but about, what people have, how organizations can approach communities. But I think that you did answer it. Did I ask you first?
You did, but I got something else to add.
Okay, go for it.
Give you a bit of time to get organized. Thank you. So one time I did this course at Royal Roads, and they didn't run it more than one time. It was on Indigenous and corporate relations quite a number of years ago. And reason why I did it was because I wanted to flip the switch. It was a graduate certificate program, and I thought it was really good in suitable for adult learners. And why I really enjoyed it was because I knew we were being profiled. We're always being profiled. And now in almost every major corporation in the country, there's Aboriginal affairs departments. And so it goes without saying, even in the philanthropic community and NGOs, everybody. And I was going, that's maddening to me. What the hell is this? And it's almost like entities that have these mandates and they want something. And so I said, I'm gonna learn about this beast. And so I started to review different types of written formal agreements between Native people and corporate entities and all kinds across a whole vast spectrum, and try to understand this. And so I would provide some cautionary comments on this about that engagement, like even the question, right? How do we do better in engaging with Indigenous people? It's like mining for information and process. We're guarded people, and rightfully so. And so where is that space? Where do we create that space for that engagement and that balanced perspective to honor our responsibilities to our people, to our land, and to our water, and taking into consideration, again, contrary to public opinion that we're anti-development or whatever, I would argue that most of our leadership across the country is measured. They're overwhelmed, but they're trying to measure and strike a balance around a process. And like, there's government bureaucrats, that are responsible for kind of as wards of the state looking after us and our stuff. And it's like, it's overwhelming. And so these people that have that responsibility, that are elected into these positions of responsibility and leadership, you got to go easy. You got to go easy. Every engagement is unique, and supporting that institutional capacity for that engagement is it's a challenging question. And I even ask a question about that question, like, how do we move forward in a good way? Because there's something that is hard to describe in words, and especially on a platform like this, and it's called a feeling. It's not what we have in here, but it's what we have in here. And we know when games are being played, when we're being played, and we don't want to be manipulated. We don't want to be dragged around by the nose by anybody. We want to make our own decisions, and sometimes we might even make bad decisions, and we can learn from those decisions. That's the whole point of supporting self-determination and supporting, giving effect to the implementation of these ideals like UNDRIP, the inherent right to self-determination. We have fought tooth and nail to get to a place where we can make our own decisions for ourselves and for our future generations.
Thanks very much. So there's someone else from the CRP leadership circle here, Marilyn Baptiste. And I think we're going to see if we can get her to get on the screen. I see that she has her hand up.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am now unmuted. Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you for this day, and thank you for the panel. My heart is full. I'm sorry I joined you late, but very thankful to hear all of what I have heard so far. It's like, I don't know how I could possibly add to this. However, I am just so thankful. The one thing though I want to add is for a lot of these organizations, ENGOs and what have you, the reality for us on the ground in our communities is that that's where all of this money is going. That is a big part of where, when our communities are applying for these funding to build our capacity, we are usually not successful because of all of these other organizations out there. And setting that aside, I just want to share an example. One of the organizations that worked with our community of Haniwa'in in the Tsailhqa'in Nation for many, many years throughout our title case, as well as our fight for Tulatan Fish Lake, was Friends in Imaya Valley. And the Friends in Imaya Valley raised a lot of funds to help out with the court process and many other things. One of the things that they had done was, in that relationship, was with the funding, some of the funding that they raised, they created the first ever and only wild horse ranger that added to the BC Parks, LOS BC Parks ranger from our community. And late Harry was the first park ranger and wild horse ranger for many years until that funding subsided and disappeared. However, the other portion of the work we did with Friends in Imaya Valley was with former Chief Roger and Woodward and Company. They created what they called a research protocol. In that research protocol, it was about ensuring that organizations like Friends in Imaya and other organizations worked with us as a community to employ members on the ground as the guides on the ground to different research. And they had helped us build a lot of the baseline information, like with the wild horses, the grizzly bear, as well as the wolves, and different research that has happened through the Friends in Imaya Valley, as well as the Valhalla Foundation with Wayne McCrory. And in our fight for Fish Lake, Tulatan, that was one of the huge aspects and relationships that was so important to our fight, and where Wayne McCrory and his grizzly bear studies had did a submission to the panel, to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Panel on both occasions, the unprecedented 2-panel process over how many years there. So that was one of the biggest parts of that scathing report that was that denied the Prosperity Project on Fish Lake. And that is just one small example, or 2 small examples in that process. And the big important piece, as all of the panel have been sharing, is being able to work with community and building that relationship. And these are some of the ways that we had done a lot of work and baseline work that our community needs and still requires, but I don't believe that is carrying on at the moment. But there's a very good example, and I thank you all. And one of the biggest things too that I have to say for our people on the ground is most media, doesn't matter who it is, where it is, they do not hear our people until we fight, as Frank said, tooth and nail. We fight and we fight to get our voice in the media, get our word and our story out there. That's what's important. And if there is a way for such organizations to help us in sharing that, as well as sharing your dollars that are continuing to go to all these organizations, that is a big help for our communities, because we are definitely limited in capacity in many different ways. So I thank you all. Sachanatya.
Thanks very much, Marilyn. So we have a couple more questions before we sign off for the day. We have one about the best way to integrate scientific research and traditional knowledge. So How can we do it well? How can we make sure that, as some of you have referenced through the talk, that it's not just a checkbox, but it's an actual integration of those two ways of knowing. So who would like to start? Eli, would you like to start?
Yeah, I guess like involve Indigenous knowledge holders, elders, whatnot, leadership and such in framing the questions to begin with. In right from the beginning, particularly I've been kind of ranting about this framing the problem, and I saw a follow-up question to my comments about the how like draining the lake, the Sumas Lake, led to problems then down the road, and then it's an oversimplification just to say, oh, it's climate change's fault. See, the problem with climate change, and I'm so happy that Marilyn Baptiste is speaking up and engaging the conversation here. It was something that she shared actually in one of our conversations about climate change from her elders in the Namaya Valley in Honeygutin. This idea that in the popular culture, climate change is framed as a war on climate change. It's sort of posited in an adversarial way, like so many things in popular American culture. It's us against them, or them against us, or whatever. It's divisiveness. And what the interesting reflection from Maryland's elders was about how, well, why are you fighting our mother? Mother Earth, she's cleansing herself and she's smudging herself. And I would add, from elders that I've spoken with from Dakota Nation and in southern Manitoba, when I was a little boy, that they taught, just a little granny comes to school and tells some stories about how disease was also used in nature to bring balance. And so again, with the COVID-19 pandemic, and this, like, going back, building on what our little Dakota elder had said about the use of disease in historic times in nature to bring, when humankind loses respect for the earth, who loses respect for other creatures that we share the world with, how disease is used to bring balance back. Now, our tribal parks initiative at home, where I'm from, our elders told us that we have to prepare for future pandemics because of the imbalanced relationship that writ large humanity has with the earth. And so these safe havens, places of safe haven, safe refuge, where we can fall back on nature in times of need, and keeping the knowledge about how to engage the natural world. So when the pandemic hit, we were expecting it. So I really didn't flinch myself. It didn't surprise me. But I was really disappointed in the dominant narrative that science will solve the problem. All you need to do is get this vaccine, and then we can go back to life as normal. Well, it's really similarly with the climate change narrative that scientists will help us get out of this problem. Well, it's not that simple. And the pandemic was an opportunity for us to collectively pause and think about what our new normal should be and could be, and about learning to respect Mother Earth. And so the beauty of what Maryland's elders had shared that day via Maryland was that it doesn't mean that there's not an urgency to act, but it disarms the adversarialness of it. And it says, and for me anyways, it creates a sense of sacred urgency to act. And Mother Earth is not punishing us. Like any mother or parent, who has unconditional love for their children, she's correcting us with a firm but loving hand, and she's bringing balance back. And so what is the role of science in that? And how can that, to me, I see that when science is misguided, it can create damage, incredible damage. So Indigenous scientists need to come to those knowledge holders and say, what kind of questions do you have? How can we direct our scientific and technological capacity in a better direction? That's what I think is what's needed there. And then I think we'll get to better outcomes. Anyways, I could go on and on forever about this, but I'll just be quiet now and let the other panelists speak.
You need to unmute.
Yeah.
Well, I made it 2 hours without doing that. So, Dati, do you have any thoughts about integrating Western science and Indigenous knowledge? And Marilyn said in the chat, it can't be extractive as well. It can't be a checkbox, and it also can't be extractive. So how can it be done in a way that's meaningful?
Yeah. Respectfully, this is probably one of my least favorite questions. I think I've been asked this question tirelessly over the course of the time I studied and then over the course of my professional career. And I feel like it's still plaguing our communities. How can our knowledge be integrated in a respectful way? I crave the time when it's the other way, when it's our knowledge systems leading the forefront and we're matching into Western science to what we're trying to lead. And I'm seeing an uptake in that approach a bit more, but not enough. I'm tired of the question, and not because of the intent behind it, just because of the lack of proper solution to actually achieving what I think is the intent behind it. That being said, I would never discourage any researcher from working to integrate our knowledge and our knowledge systems into the way that they're approaching their work. And it comes back to building good partnership. It comes back to building a good trusting relationship. There's often like a very sort of simplified system that exists, when you go get a research permit, you fill out a form, it gets sent around, at least where I'm from, gets sent around to, Indigenous governments. We get a chance to comment. That's the worst way to build a partnership and ask for partnership in a study. It really does come to creating connection and hosting those dialogues. It always works best in person. COVID really put a halt to that. We're kind of coming out of that COVID time. But I have to say that I really just do crave a time where the question isn't no longer how can we incorporate Indigenous knowledge into Western research projects or Western ways of understanding, but rather this is the Indigenous knowledge system. This is what it's telling us. Now, how can we match Western systems of knowledge to that framework as opposed to the other way? In my experiences, some of the best research partnerships I was a part of were those that came with the interest to partner and then completely shifted their entire project based off of the conversations that we hosted that then helped guide the path to how that research was then developed. Sometimes it's not so easy for people to shift things. I know because of all the, the check boxes that they might be coming in. They can't help but hold the ice cream. And so, we do the best we can on both sides. I think within our community, we do our best to try and meet you, even if you're offering us ice cream. We'll try and we'll work with that. But I so crave the time when that whole question is completely inverted, and that's what we're all gearing towards, I think, in the work that we're all doing collectively. So,
thanks very much. That was a really good answer. So Megan, what do you think about integrating Western science into Indigenous knowledge? How can we flip that script the way that Dati is hoping will happen sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, we've made mistakes on this too. We've done exactly what Dati is talking about that. Let's go back to the knowledge basket and this community of practice. The knowledge basket is gorgeous, and that you can go in there and you can make your own basket and store the resources that you want for later. That's, you know, I hope people really dive in and experience it. And so can organizations like mine apply that spirit to our work? So for example, WWF, we have this big carbon mapping project. So where is the ecosystem carbon in the landscape? You know, we used satellites and AI, and so, but we've mapped out where the carbon is. That needs to be in the public domain. Anybody should be able to access that information. And in particular for Indigenous communities doing conservation, wanting to do conservation, they should be able to access it to, you know, add strength to their argument and what they're putting forward, or the proposal they're putting forward, or the whatever it is, the funding application. So that spirit of sharing and not gatekeeping information, I think organizations like mine have got to just get that information, that science, that data out there for everyone to share in. And hopefully it can support some of the incredible work that's being done that's centered on Indigenous knowledge.
Thanks so much. So before I pass it to Frank, I'm just going to say thanks to all of you for being here, and thank you for having me. And it was a really great conversation, and it was a conversation that leaves me with some feelings of being uplifted and hope, which can be kind of hard in the environmental space from time to time. So Frank, if I can ask you any reflections that you have on integrating Western and Indigenous knowledge, and then if you could close this this panel today for us, that would be really wonderful. Thanks very much.
I think the question is perfect for to reflect on as a part of the closing, because we have pressing issues, pressing concerns around the very essence of our life-giving forces, like clean air and water and land. The very essence that sustains our existence is in jeopardy, and it's man-made. It's by us, and we have to make this shift. And my hope and my prayer is that we can do this, and it's going to take all of us. It's going to take both that local and traditional knowledge, and it's going to take the best of what Western science has to offer. And giving examples of that, because I come from a coastal community and fishing is a really important part of our existence, we were witness to how, like, for example, DFO managed resources, and they would take data, a little bit of data, and extrapolate it out and create computer generated models that would sort of inform management plans. But those models were flawed in their assumptions about biomass. And local people were saying, no, it's what you're saying isn't right. It's not accurate, because what you're projecting for recruitment isn't there, because we live there and we see it, and we're in relationship with it, not only for a very short window of a harvest time, but we're there all the time and we see this. And so it is necessary for these two value systems to come together. A value system that looks at it as a resource to be exploited and to get the recruitment, and then another value system that looks at everything in its totality. It's where it's all connected. And so the coming together of these two value systems where it's really specific versus an all-encompassing approach to our relationship, and that we're connected to it as we move forward. And that is manifested in this knowledge basket, in the work that we're all attempting to do, and to pull together and work together. And even if there's differences of opinion, and how do we respect one another, and how do we close that gap and come up with the best solution for our future generations. So that's my hope, and that's my prayer for how we move forward. And I want to thank you, Denise, and the other panelists. I want to thank the Eli for, in particular, the good work you have done over the years with the rest of your colleagues. It's commendable work. It's going to be valuable and important work, timely work that will inform the rest of our journey moving forward. Wallace Gayasika, thank you all so much for the opportunity to participate in this panel.
Clicko, clicko.
Thanks very much, everyone.
See.
Sigurli Swagwag, Galahindi Nioget, Swagisli Wagini Waketolora, Anita Og Ngwahiwanage, Ani Bojo, Danse, Okinapi. How? For those of you who have just gotten here or who may have arrived late, I always introduce myself in my original language. So I say Sigurli Swagwag, or hello everyone. Galahindi Nioget, so Galahindi is my name. I'm a member of the people of the Standing Stone First Nations of the Thames on Turtle Island, and we're located on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron, the Delaware, and Anishinaabe nations, in an area that we now call southwestern Ontario, that happens to be located in a segment of Turtle Island that's been relabeled Canada. And I say Yonko Yukotonga, or thank you friends for joining me, and I hope that you found this educational, informative. The whole goal of my stream is always to try to bring something that triggers awareness and then education in relation to the Indigenous people of North Turtle Island, all of Turtle Island. So whether that be ceremony, history, current events, our music, issues that are going on, it's everything Indigenous essentially is the whole key of the stream. So if you like the content, I do ask please hit the follow button. Also hit the bell if you want to be alerted to any upcoming streams, that because I do sometimes do these little pop-up streams if something comes up that I just can't wait to share. And so there was a couple of things today. Of course, the future of conservation is Indigenous-led was the theme of that panel discussion. And I was glad I got to register and jump in the Zoom meeting and be able to share that with you guys, with the community here. Because I think it's an ongoing conversation that has to be continually kind of reaffirmed, and sometimes there could be ideas that kind of go back and forth as well, that bring about an open discussion that helps people all around. So when Indigenous land defenders and Indigenous water defenders are fighting to prevent, say, oil pipelines being put through their territory, they're not fighting against that primarily to stop progress. They're fighting that to protect the land, the water, the animals, everything related to resources that are being used, and because we're all so interconnected, that one thing being affected is going to affect everything. So, if we poison the water, that water then contaminates the fish that are in it, the land animals who drink from it, the plants that absorb that water, and the humans that drink from it. And that can't be undone. Um, once that slippery slope starts to go. So there's definitely an ongoing conversation that needs to be to continue, so that we all become aware of what the best avenues are to try to get these things resolved. And Indigenous people have been trying to do teachings, and we have done teachings and ceremonies and passed down knowledge from generation to generation as part of our tradition. One of the biggest things that we often use for teaching is what we call the seven sacred laws, or the seven grandfather teachings. And I know that many people probably don't know a lot about the seven grandfather teachings, unless you're Indigenous, or unless you've been um, walking in the same circles of Indigenous people and learning from them. So I'd like to show a short clip on the seven sacred laws, so that you can kind of get a grasp of our philosophy on passing knowledge down through the generations, and how we interact with each other. Again, because we are all interconnected in one way or another. So it's one of those things, I think, when everybody always kind of falls back on, like in that discussion, is the word respect. It's a single word. It encompasses a lot, but it's not the only word, and it's not the only teaching or the only concept that we have to kind of create as part of our backbone of interacting with other with everything that we're interconnected with. So this is an elder doing this teaching, and he's teaching it to some high school students, and so it seems to be at a level that everybody should be able to grasp, and it's really only a summary of all of the teachings. So it's not, that's why it's not going to be that long. I think it's about 20 minutes, but it's going to cover all of the teachings, and it'll give you kind of a general overview of each of the teachings, so that you can kind of understand our philosophy. So I'm going to get my face off the screen here again, and I'm going to put this over here so that we can let me first of all make sure my audio is set properly, and I will try to get this started for us.
Tens of thousands of years ago, the first peoples of Turtle Island, North America, were given a gift from the Creator, the seven sacred laws. Represented by seven animals, these teachings offer a special understanding of how we as people should live our lives on Mother Earth. Elders continue to share these teachings in their sacred lodges today.
Ojo anin dine magnetuk nigani akin ane dishnikas kinyo dotem saging donji anishna benda. My dear relatives, I want to welcome you to the Turtle Lodge. In this lodge we share ceremonies, we share teachings, and we share our identity as the first peoples. Not far from here is a very special place we call Manitowopi, which translates to where the Creator sits. Our sacred site of Manitowopi is acknowledged every time we say the name of the province of Manitoba. It's important because this is where our creation as a people began. In the beginning, There was only darkness and silence. But the sound of the shishigwan, the sacred rattle, broke the silence. In the distance, a shining blue light appeared, and it descended upon Mother Earth from the sky world through a portal called Pagonegijik, the hole in the sky. And it landed on Manitoba. This divine shining blue light is in each one of us. This is your spirit. The Anishinaabe people have gathered in this sacred place for thousands of years to have ceremony and to honor the spirit. One day, a young boy was brought to Manitoba to fulfill a rite of passage, a vision quest. This is how a young boy became a man, by being initiated by the first woman, who we call Mother Earth. He fasted with no food or water for 4 days and 4 nights. Alone in the darkness, the young boy felt very afraid. As darkness fell, he would stay close to the sacred fire and wonder, why am I here? It was the final night. His eyes felt heavy. Comforted by the fire's warm glow, he drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, a strange sound snapped him awake. He called out, "Hello?" There was no answer, but the boy was certain someone or something was there. He was no longer alone. During the vision quest ceremony, a boy must spend time alone on the land, seeking a vision. He must be initiated by Mother Earth. In doing so, the boy has a path to manhood that is based on respect for women and all life on the earth. It was the 4th and final night, tired, hungry, and anxious. He awaited the sunrise. As he lay in a light sleep close to the fire, a strange noise woke him. The boy quickly sat up and searched in all directions, but saw nothing. Then a deep voice came from the sacred fire.
"My grandson, we have heard your call."
The boy turned to the flames and froze in disbelief as a large buffalo appeared.
"Do not fear, for I bring you the first law of respect. I have given every part of myself to help the people to survive. Respect means giving from the heart without expecting anything in return. Now take this message, my boy, and share it with the people."
The buffalo stared deep into the boy's eyes, making a connection that spoke to his spirit before disappearing. Mashkote Bijike, the grandfather buffalo, stands on guard to remind us of the law of respect. Respect all life on Mother Earth. Respect the land. Respect your elders. Respect people of all colors. The boy couldn't believe what he had seen. He sat in silence, thinking of the teaching shared by the buffalo. Suddenly, he was startled by a high-pitched screech. He looked to the dark sky and saw a large creature flying towards him. You see, the young boy was given a very special gift, an important message of respect. We need to remember the spirit of respect is shown to all life because we are all related. The animals, the water, and the land, which is our source of life. As the young boy reflected on the law of respect, a loud screech from above startled him. The boy jumped up and looked to the sky. A huge gust of wind blew him to the ground. He looked up to see something incredible. An enormous eagle stood over him.
My boy, I am here to bring you the law of love. Unconditional love is expressed in your action of kindness. Love the land, for the land provides everything we need in order to survive. Love yourself, for it is only when you love yourself that you can truly love someone else. Love all life on earth. Love the Great Spirit.
Megasi, Grandfather Eagle is a symbol of love. He flies the highest to receive love from the Great Spirit, then drops it on the people. Grandfather Eagle brushed the boy with his wing. The bird's touch filled the boy with an overwhelming sense of love and kindness, and he began to cry with happiness. The eagle wrapped the boy in his wings, comforting him before flying up to the sky. He wiped away his tears as the eagle flew off and then returned to his fire. The young boy wouldn't be alone for long. The silence was broken by a loud noise deep in the bush. Something was moving towards him, but this time the boy was no longer fearful. He was ready for his next visitor. To feel true love is to know Gijemanidu, the Great Spirit. It is understood that one's first love must be Gijemanidu, our Creator. He is considered the source and giver of life, enjoyed by all creation. The young boy continued on his vision quest, feeling an overwhelming sense of love he received from Megasi, Grandfather Eagle. As he tended to the fire, he heard something in the forest. The crackling of branches and leaves gets louder and louder. He focused closely on the tree line and stepped closer to see what was there. From the bush, a giant grizzly bear appeared and approached the boy.
Brave one, I bring you the law of courage. Always do the right thing that is expressed from your heart. Courage is to have strength to resist doing something you know isn't right.
The first people learned the vision quest ceremony from watching the bear fast while sleeping in the winter months. Many Anishinaabe ceremonies involve fasting. It is a ceremony where people seek the spiritual strength to be courageous enough to live their vision and to have the courage to love oneself. The boy and the bear looked at each other in silence. A feeling of courage washed over the boy. Then the bear turned and disappeared into the dark forest. As the boy wandered back to the fire, a loud noise stopped him in his tracks. The treetops swayed all around him. Something big was thundering quickly towards him. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to listen to your heart and to your spirit as it's telling you what to do, even when your mind tells you something else. We all need courage to do the right thing. After the bear left, the young boy was startled by a large noise. Something was stomping through the bush, and it was getting louder. The boy stood on guard as the treetops swayed. Whatever it was getting closer. Then silence. The only sound that the boy could hear was the sound of something breathing. Then he noticed a pair of eyes glowing in the darkness. Using all his courage, the boy stepped towards them. Slowly, a towering being covered in hair emerged from the bush. The boy froze as this massive human-like creature stood over him.
Young man, I bring you the law of honesty. To be honest is to be someone who is trusted and who speaks with truth. To never lie and always be genuine. Say what you mean mean what you say, and always stay true to your values.
Long ago, there was a giant called Kitchisabe. You may know him as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The Sabe teaches us to never lie or gossip. Be honest with yourself and others. Speak from your heart and be true to your word. The young boy, mesmerized by the words shared by the large being, held his heart as Sabe vanished into the darkness. On his way back to the fire, a soft whisper came from behind a fallen tree.
You have a gift, young man. You must share it.
The young boy quickly looked around, wondering where the soft voice came from. As he crept closer to the fallen tree, something scurried from behind him. The elders say the best way to honor the spirit of the Sabe is to speak from your heart and be true to your word. The young boy stepped closer to the fallen tree to see who was speaking to him. From the edge of the log, a white tail was lying flat on the ground. Suddenly, a big fluffy beaver jumped up and sat on the log. "Who are you?" the boy asked.
Bonjour, grandson. I bring you the law of wisdom. Wisdom is knowing you have a special gift and purpose, and using your gift to build a peaceful world. Everyone has a gift. Your gift was given to you by Kijimanitu to help the people. You will be happiest when you are using your gift.
The beaver has a gift of sharp teeth. They use their gift to chew logs and build dams. If the beaver did not use the gift of sharp teeth, their teeth would grow long and they would not survive. Just like the beaver, we need to use our gifts to fulfill our purpose and live a happy life. After the beaver shared his teaching of wisdom, he quickly scurried off into the forest. The boy laid next to the fire. He looked up to the sky and wondered, "What is my purpose?" Just then, a loud howl echoed like a crack of thunder from the sky. To know wisdom is to know your spirit is part of you. It defines your identity, your gifts, and your purpose that help you serve humankind and Mother Earth. The boy was lying on the ground, watching the clouds as they passed by the moon, when suddenly he was startled. The boy jumped up and saw the silhouette of an animal sitting on a cliff. It leapt down the rocks and approached the boy. Right in front of him, a large timber wolf stepped out of the shadows and bowed his head.
Bonjour. I bring you the law of humility. To know humility is to be humble and modest, and to know you are no more or less important than any other living being in this beautiful world. We all have been created equal. Think of others before you think of yourself, and be grateful for everything you have.
Just like the wolf, practicing humbleness means always thinking of others before we think of ourselves. The wolf stepped back and let out another loud howl, bowed his head, and ran off into the darkness. The boy bowed his head to return the humbleness shared by the wolf. After receiving many visitors and teachings, the boy was feeling very tired. After preparing for bed, he lay silent, reflecting on all the important teachings he had just received. Before he could fall asleep, he began to hear a gentle voice chanting a soft melody. He sat up. Who could it be now? To be humble is to understand we are all equal in the eyes of Gije Manitou, who has unconditional love for all of us. The wolf left this important message for the young boy to follow. The boy lay in silence, reflecting on all the wonderful teachings he had just received, when he began to hear a soft voice gently singing a beautiful traditional song. Eager to see where the beautiful music was coming from, he got up and looked over at a nearby petroform. A turtle emerged from behind the rock. She walked up to the boy, singing softly. After finishing her song, the turtle exhaled and smiled gently.
Grandson, you have listened well, as each animal gave you their teachings. I am here to bring you the law of truth. To know truth is to live and walk with all the 7 sacred laws you have just learned. When the human beings walk these laws, then there will be peace.
The turtle pointed to the horizon. Off in the distance, the boy received a vision of the turtle petroform. Then it quickly morphed into the first woman petroform, and finally transformed into the face of an old woman smiling down on him.
You have now been initiated by the first woman. You must never forget the sacredness of the gift of life that Mother Earth and all women bring to this world.
Grandmother Turtle gave a warm smile and faded into a white mist. The boy smiled as tears rolled down his face. The sun was rising in the distance as the boy opened his eyes to a new day. He had completed his vision quest. He gave thanks to Gije Manitou before making his way home to serve the people and to share these teachings with the world. Now you have begun your journey. You have received the 7 sacred laws and a small understanding of the sacredness of woman. And I hope that each of you that were able to hear the teachings that were shared today, that it will make you the kind of people that will change the world. And in the language that has been given to my people, I want to use the final word of acknowledging all of you in appreciation of my gratitude. Mi gwech.
Siguli swagwag. Again, Galahindi ni ogets, wagisle wagi ni wakintolora, onidag, ingwehewanege. So I want to again say Yanko for being here. For those of you who arrived late, what we've done today so far is we watched or partook in a open panel discussion called "The Future of Conservation is Indigenous-led," and we had some some speakers that were most primarily indigenous, one non-indigenous person who was part of the World Wildlife Fund of Canada, all talking about what to do, and the indigenous governments that forefront the protecting of the largest, healthiest, most diverse areas in what is now known as Canada. The indigenous approaches to conservation have increasingly proven to be more effective and more successful than the state-led kind of fortress conservation approaches. Now, however, it's only relatively recently that we have been seeing that promising shift with increased visibility and recognition of the indigenous leadership. So we had this open panel discussion to talk about that, and I think that it really went well. And I hope that if you were able to catch any of it, that you found it enlightening and educational. And then following that, we just watched a clip by the Anishinaabe elder talking about the 7 sacred laws, or what are also known as um, the 7 grandfather teachings, is what I think most people would refer to it as. And I think that that's also presented in a way that is very simple and easy to understand, and without all the clutter of um, language and other in complexities of the teachings. So this is what my goal is always to bring stuff that's going to be accessible, as far as language and acceptance to everyone, because there's so much that we know. There's so much that very few people know about when it comes to the true indigenous history, and that's what I want to bring, and as well as the ceremony and our teachings whenever possible. And so that being said, I guess a couple of things to kind of keep in mind. June is Indigenous History Month, so tomorrow is National Indigenous Peoples Day, which was also known as Indigenous Solidarity Day or Summer Solstice. There's going to be events happening tomorrow, which I'm not 100% sure which ones I'm going to share, so just keep an eye. I'll keep your alerts on. And so that you get an alert when I go live, or keep an eye on the channel if you're on Twitch anyway. So that once I figure out what I'm sharing, I'll be able to you'll be able to join in on that. As well, on Wednesday, 2:00 p.m. will be the third stream of the Downey Wenjack Foundation, celebrating Indigenous History Month. And the Downey Wenjack Foundation do this every year. They pick 3 provinces and do a history of that particular province, and then they do a 4th stream, which is just an overall special Canada-wide history. So on Wednesday it'll be the history of New Brunswick. And let me just see. If you're in my Discord, you will be able to see this as well, or get updates as I post things in the Discord. But just trying to remember. Okay, so New Brunswick, the performances are going to be by Wolf Castle, Tegan Compage, and Natalie Sapier will all be doing musical performances on Wednesday, and then there'll be an elder and a couple of speakers if the format stays true to the past ones. So definitely join us for that. That'll be live at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. And then the next thing is, also keep in mind, next Monday is the 27th. It's going to be my 1 year as a Twitch affiliate. And I'm going to have Linda Black Elk from North Dakota, who's a botanist and shares her knowledge about our medicines and foods. So with her diverse mix of background of Korean, Mongolian, Ketwapa ancestry, Black Elk grew up in the Ohio Valley before settling in the Osage Saskatchewan territory, where her husband and children are members of the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River Lakota nations. And so this has really afforded her the ability to experience and learn from many of the elders and knowledge keepers of the area. And Linda will be here on the 27th to talk about 5 indigenous medicines that we can all use in our everyday recipes, just to help with keeping us um, healthy. So that should be a good one. And if there's anything about indigenous medicines or indigenous plants that you're curious about, that will be the time to bring your questions. So if you think of a question you don't know if you'll remember it, just throw it into the Discord or whisper me, whatever works best for you. Let me know. Uh, if you're going to be here, you plan to be here, bring it with you when you come into the stream, and provide that to Linda. She has a wealth of information and knowledge, so she's the perfect opportunity for you to get those questions answered. Well, Caveman, I appreciate you being here because anytime that someone's here, the time that you spend here kind of gives me hope that we are really um, looking at building relationships that are going to improve the future and make things better all the way around. So thank you for being here. What I'm going to do, what I do at the end of all my streams is I play a rendition of a song called "The Peaceful Warrior." Now, for those of you who don't know what the Peaceful Warrior is, I'll give you a little snippet there in the chat. And so what I do is I'll play a rendition of the Peaceful Warrior, and then while I'm playing that, I'll set up a raid to see who will go raid. And so also while you're reading through that, if you can copy the raid call, whichever one's appropriate to you, that would be great. In the meantime, let me go and get a version of this song to play. Now, one of the guys who covered this song, so essentially these are all Twitch streamers who are creating their own renditions or their own interpretations of the song. And so I will go ahead and get that song playing. And one that I'm going to play today, he had to re-record it because he had a couple hiccups the first time he did it. But his name's KR Acoustic, and I'll play his rendition of the song, and then we'll set up to raid somebody. So in the meantime, let me get my face off the screen here so you can see the clip as it starts.
My name is KR. I'm a war of peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. What I'm not doing here, what I really want to. Save the world, we gotta change. Let me see. I'm going to battle for the red, white, yellow, and black. I'm going to fight for the ones who can't fight back. I'm talking about all the people from the water to the skies. I'm talking about all the issues from the truth to the lies. I'm gonna make my stand with the people I'm with. You wanna argue that? Go back in bed again. 'Cause you more, so sit down, shut up and listen as I give my grand. So, I'm gonna target the corruption in our government. I'm gonna target the poison in our environment. I'm gonna target the injustice to the people. I'm gonna hit every target or I'm gonna keep still. I'm gonna battle the battle of battles. I'm gonna shake up the cage until it rattles. Cause you're never gonna get me, not until the problems of the world are cut at the knees. Know what I'm saying? Let me kick it out one more time, so crystal clear the message is in my rhyme. My name is KR and I'm a war for peace. Our salt sins the tax I see must cease. And I'm gonna fight the red, white, and yellow and black. I'm gonna fight for the ones who can't fight back. So, let's keep passing around our information so we can improve this planet through education. Somebody's gotta make the people aware. Somebody's gotta make everybody care. So pass my message on if you dare. It's mine and yours, we got to share because there's power in one man's voice. Then all the weapons of military choice. So with the voice, your voice, we can shout out loud that we belong in the human race and we are proud. You don't have to be a master of science to see that we need to create a worldwide alliance in order to keep approaching corporations and the acts of people for their insubordination. When they bring what's happening to our waters and the disease is spreading through our slaughters. What about the government officials that stand behind them with the backdoor handshakes and the people diesel? I know that they've seen how the world could be devastated through the actions of a man and the minds of the hatred. Look at Hitler, Charlie Manson, and even Osama. These are the men who brought us trauma. These are the men that brought us trauma. Then we have cops with hookers in the backseat. We have the poster teens and knifing each other in the streets. We have drug dealers hooking up kids with crack. Just a lot of shit in this world that's whack. We have people who stand up before the rights and get shot. Now where you better batten down the hatches. So we head to the next round. There ain't no getting through a war without any losses. Lynn, King, and Gandhi are all symbolic of crosses. Speakers of the past that we're gonna inspire. Speakers of the future that we're gonna try in this world and with a metaphorical suture. I said my name is KR and I'm a war for peace. All the senseless attack that I see must cease. But I would be the one to move this world all alone. So just remember it's also your home. And if I put my voice with your voice and we shout together, why people gonna hear things are gonna get better than that peace.
Absolutely. Again, that was KR Acoustic, and he's did a cool rendition of the Peaceful Warrior. I really appreciate him re-recording that as obviously I wanted to have his rendition of the song to see what he does with it. And I thought he pretty well kept to the way he originally did it, um, except without the hiccups and the that he had with the first one. So that's great. And then, so what I was saying, on the 27th, that'll be my 1 year as a Twitch affiliate, and I will be uh, having a guest on the stream called Linda Black Elk, and she will be doing um, a discussion on 5 indigenous medicines that we can use in our everyday recipes. I'll have a couple of never before streamed renditions of the Peaceful Warrior to share, and maybe I'll go over the meanings behind the emotes that are part of my channel. So that because I've been asked about them before, so I'll go over that on my stream on the 27th as well. And again, I appreciate everyone being here, and I hope that you will all come back. And if you enjoyed it, keep your alerts on, because if there's something that pops up, again, I'm not 100% sure what time I'm going to be streaming tomorrow, but because it's Indigenous Solidarity Day, I will have to stream at some point tomorrow just to kind of celebrate the day. In the meantime, thanks again for your support and for being here. And let's go over and raid here